Hey guys, welcome to the third episode of the Genre Report. Today we're going to look at Nia DaCosta's post-apocalyptic horror 28 years later, The Bone Temple. I'm Charlie, I saw this movie, let's get into it and talk about genre. The Bone Temple is a direct sequel to Danny Boyle's 28 Years Later from 2025. Itself a sequel to Boyle's 28 Days Later in 2002, and also 2007's 28 Weeks Later, directed by Juan Carlos Fresnadillo. The first film takes place 28 days after a contagious rage virus has infected most of Britain's population, turning them into hyper-aggressive cannibal predators. In this film, Boyle and screenwriter Alex Garland use societal collapse to explore the human capacities for good and evil without the structure of law and order to guide them. These include themes of militarism, abduction, and sexual violence. The sequel, 28 Weeks Later, is set 6 months after the first film, and deals with society attempting to return to Britain following the end of the infection. Predictably, it doesn't end well, and the film ends with the infected reaching Paris via the Channel Tunnel. None of the original cast returned, and while Boyle and Garland expressed interest in making the sequel, they elected to direct and write the science fiction film Sunshine instead, which also features 28 Days Later star Cillian Murphy. The first film's producer, Andrew McDonald, does share a producer credit on 28 Weeks Later, however. Then in 2025, Danny Boyle did direct a sequel, 28 Years Later, set 28 years after the events of the first film. Garland also returned to write the script, while the original cinematographer, Anthony Dodd Mantle, also returned. Boyle, Garland, and McDonald are all producers on the film, along with executive producer Cillian Murphy. This film reverses the ending of 28 Weeks Later. Now, Britain is quarantined and isolated from the rest of the world, which has remained uninfected. The film stars a new cast including Jodie Comer and Aaron Taylor-Johnson as Isla and Jamie, with Alfie Williams as their son Spike. The Bone Temple is set in the immediate aftermath of 28 Years Later. Nia DaCosta takes over as director, with Garland writing the screenplay again. The Bone Temple of the title is a reference to the monument introduced in the previous film, Memento Mori, an ossuary built by the mysterious but ultimately benevolent Dr. Kelson, played in both films by Ralph Fiennes. This film follows Kelson's attempts to study and even treat the infected, leading to the development of an unlikely friendship with Samson, a highly aggressive alpha infected, also introduced in the last film, played by Chai Lewis Parry. So now that that's out of the way, let's talk about genre. 28 Days Later is not a zombie film. However, it is also a zombie film. Let me explain. Boyle has rejected the label of zombie film to describe the series' first installment. The infected are not animated corpses, and the word zombie is never used. In fact, the question of whether the infected can be called alive is a major question for Kelson in this film. More accurately, you could call it a post-apocalyptic survival horror that has creatures that resemble zombies without technically being the living dead. Despite this, Boyle acknowledges taking inspiration from the films of George A. Romero, specifically Night of the Living Dead in 1968, Dawn of the Dead in 1978, and Day of the Dead in 1985, which are very much the cornerstones of zombie cinema in the second half of the 20th century. However, the zombie film precedes Romero by several decades. What Romero does in the 1960s is move the genre away from its folkloric origins and bind them to modern science, specifically some sort of virus. This has become the norm for zombie fiction, from Brain Dead to The Walking Dead. 1932's White Zombie and 1936's Revolt of the Zombies, both directed by Victor Halperin, can be viewed as early progenitors of the zombie film genre. In these films, we see a progression into what we would ultimately recognize as the modern zombie film. In White Zombie, the zombification is limited to a single woman, while Revolt of the Zombies deals with the familiar group of zombified people. The Orientalist nature of zombie fiction shouldn't be understated here. The mythological zombie originates in Haitian folklore. White Zombie is set in Haiti, while Revolt of the Zombies takes place in Cambodia. I Walked with a Zombie was released in 1943 and is set in the Caribbean. This is not strictly a zombie film. Whether zombies are real and not part of a mass delusion is partly ambiguous, and, like in White Zombie, the zombification is extremely narrow in affecting characters. It's not until Night of the Living Dead that we begin to see the zombie as potentially world-ending and society-destroying, plague-carrying cannibal. While Wes Craven's 1988 film, The Serpent and the Rainbow, takes the zombie back to its roots in Haitian folklore, Romero's template remains in place. With this post-zombie apocalypse backdrop, The Bone Temple is able to do something unique with its storytelling. The past 3 films laid out the world that the characters exist in, and with that established, the roving hordes of infected are now fairly secondary to the film, allowing for the exploration of distinctly human themes. Certainly the infected pose a threat, but many of our characters are at peace with fighting or living alongside them. So the main issue of the film comes not from clashes with the infected, but from other humans. most notably a gang that called themselves the Jimmies. We know that society collapsed in Britain in 2002. In this respect, the following decades of pop culture a 2026 audience is familiar with did not occur as they remember. The most egregious signifier of this is the iconography of Jimmy Savile, who the Jimmies are styled on. Jimmy Savile was a popular media personality and DJ in Britain between the 1960s and 1990s. Following his death in 2011, we now know that he was one of the UK's most prolific sex offenders in history, using his position of power to assault victims that range from children to the elderly. Crucially, Savile never faced justice during his lifetime, and in a timeline that diverts from our own in 2002, his crimes never become common knowledge. Therefore, the Jimmies are not consciously referencing the crimes of Savile in their fashion choices, but doing so is an explicit sign to the audience that something isn't quite right. The Jimmies first appear at the end of 28 years later, rescuing Spike from a mob of infected. All we learn about them here is that they seem to be flamboyant martial artists, in the vein of Power Rangers, and that they clearly resemble Savile. In the Bone Temple, we learn more about them. They are shown to be not merely surviving, but thriving and enjoying the freedom that comes with society's collapse. They go from place to place, torturing and murdering whoever they come across. This is referencing one scene in the previous film before the Jimmies actually make an appearance, but we come across one of their victims. They are not driven by rage or hunger as the infected are, but a conscious desire to harm and inflict pain on other people. They represent evil, and a specifically human type of evil. From a genre perspective, the Jimmies are clearly horror characters. Any film with zombies is to some extent a horror film, but the Jimmies take this to a different place. With them in the center, it is no longer a zombie horror, but a slasher or a home invasion horror. Critic Mark Kermode compares them to Droogs in Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange, while their activities also resemble villains in 2008's The Strangers and 2013's The Purge. These characters want to find ways to create the horror film, their fantasies, within the horror film everyone else is stuck in. The Jimmies believe that the world ending is the work of Satan and that their leader, Sir Lord Jimmy Crystal, played by Jack O'Connell, is the son of Satan and the Antichrist. This brings them into conflict with Dr. Kelson, who they reasonably take to be the literal devil, given his bone temple and the red iodine he puts on his skin to ward off the infected. As we've already stated, Kelson is spending the apocalypse studying the infected and discovering whether or not they can be treated. Obviously, Kelson's selfless pursuit of help contrasts the Jimmies' joyous pursuit of harm. However, they have more similarities than might first appear. Like Jimmy Crystal, Kelson is refusing to be ruled by the laws of the zombie film. The difference is that while Jimmy's view is, just because there are zombies, this doesn't prevent it from being another sort of horror, Kelson has decided just because there are zombies doesn't mean I have to act like a character in a horror film who either seeks to merely survive or destroy the monster entirely. They both occupy different stances in pursuit of resisting the genre they have found themselves in, making them two sides of one pursuit. There have certainly been zombie films that subvert our us or them expectations of the genre. 2004's Shaun of the Dead ends with Shaun playing video games with his zombified best friend. 2013's Warm Bodies is essentially a zombie romantic comedy pairing an uninfected human with a zombie. The 2018 Disney Channel film Zombies deals with relationships between zombies and humans in an American high school, treating zombies as just another subculture. This spawned 3 sequels, most recently Zombies 4: Dawn of the Vampires, released in 2025. Clearly, some films that deal with zombies as more than just monsters do already exist. What this film manages to achieve is to go further, not merely subverting the expectations of the genre. This film's characters hold unique moral outlooks to reject generic conventions. They forge a new way of looking at how to live in a world full of living dead. For what it's worth, I think 28 years later The Bone Temple is excellent, and I love talking about it. This is my favourite Nia DaCosta film and possibly my favourite installment in a series I genuinely love. I really hope Boyle & Company managed to make the 3rd film as they planned. For more videos like this, please like and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you soon.